Most people think of avocado as a trendy fat, something added to toast because it tastes good, or because it fits a fashionable idea of healthy eating. The assumption is simple. It is high in fat. Therefore, it must either be indulgent or, at best, a convenient source of calories dressed up as nutrition. What is usually missed is that avocado behaves very differently from most foods we group under the word fat. Its effects unfold slowly, quietly, and across systems that rarely get discussed together. When you look closely, avocado exposes a tension in modern nutrition science. The gap between what looks healthy on a label and what actually reshapes metabolism, inflammation, and cellular aging over time. By the end of this discussion, you will understand why avocado is less about adding something extra to your diet, and more about changing how the body processes everything else you eat, how it manages energy, and how it protects itself from long-term wear. To understand avocado's relevance to longevity, it helps to move away from nutrients as isolated numbers and instead think in terms of biological environments. Aging is not driven by a single deficiency. It is driven by cumulative stress on cells, by inefficient energy handling, by chronic low-grade inflammation, and by gradual loss of metabolic flexibility. Avocado enters this picture not as a miracle food, but as a stabilizer. Its fats are mostly monounsaturated, particularly oleic acid, the same dominant fat found in olive oil. Oleic acid integrates into cell membranes, making them more fluid and resilient. This matters because membrane fluidity affects how receptors work, how insulin signals are transmitted, and how cells respond to stress. Over decades, small improvements in these processes compound. Cells that communicate efficiently age more slowly than those constantly fighting rigidity and oxidative damage. What makes avocado unusual is not only the fat it contains, but the matrix in which that fat is delivered. Avocado is rich in fiber, both soluble and insoluble, which slows digestion and blunts sharp rises in blood glucose. Stable blood sugar is one of the quiet pillars of longevity. Repeated glucose spikes accelerate glycation, damage proteins, and increase oxidative stress. By slowing absorption, avocado reduces the metabolic turbulence that most modern meals create. This is not about avoiding carbohydrates entirely, but about changing the speed and context in which energy enters the bloodstream. Over time, this supports insulin sensitivity, which is strongly associated with healthier aging. There is another overlooked effect happening at the same time. Fat-soluble nutrients from other foods are absorbed more efficiently in the presence of avocado. Carotenoids, certain polyphenols, and fat-soluble vitamins require dietary fat to cross the intestinal barrier. When avocado is eaten alongside vegetables, it acts as a biological facilitator. This changes the nutritional yield of an entire meal without adding complexity. Longevity is not only about what you eat, but about what your body is actually able to use. Avocado increases that efficiency quietly, without needing to be emphasized or advertised. As we move deeper into the physiology, the relationship between avocado and inflammation becomes clearer. Chronic inflammation is one of the most consistent features of aging. It does not usually present as pain or obvious illness, but as persistent immune activation that slowly damages tissues. Avocado contains compounds, such as phytosterols and polyphenols that interact with inflammatory signaling pathways. These compounds do not shut inflammation down completely, which would be dangerous, but they appear to reduce unnecessary activation. The result is a more measured immune response. Over time, this matters for cardiovascular health, joint integrity, and even brain aging, where inflammation plays a central role. The brain, in particular, benefits from the type of fats found in avocado. Neuronal membranes are highly sensitive to lipid composition. Fats influence neurotransmitter release, receptor sensitivity, and synaptic plasticity. Diets rich in monounsaturated fats are associated with better cognitive aging, not because they stimulate the brain, but because they protect its structure. Avocado also provides lutein, a carotenoid that accumulates in neural tissue. Lutein is often discussed in relation to eye health, but it is increasingly recognized for its role in cognitive function. It appears to support processing speed and attention, which are functions that typically decline with age. At this point, it is important to address a common misunderstanding. Avocado is calorie-dense, and calories matter. Longevity is not supported by excess energy intake. What makes avocado compatible with long-term health is its effect on satiety. The combination of fat, fiber, and water content increases fullness signals and reduces the likelihood of overeating later. This helps regulate total energy intake without conscious restriction. Over years, small differences in appetite regulation influence body composition, metabolic health, and inflammatory burden. Avocado supports this regulation rather than disrupting it. Another subtle aspect of avocado's role in longevity is its interaction with the gut microbiome. Fiber is fermented by gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids, which influence immune function, insulin sensitivity, and even gene expression related to aging. Avocado's fiber profile supports bacterial diversity, which tends to decline with age and with highly processed diets. A diverse microbiome is more resilient and produces a broader range of beneficial metabolites. This creates a feedback loop in which the gut environment supports systemic health rather than contributing to chronic inflammation. There is also a story behind avocado that speaks to its biological uniqueness. The large seed is not an accident. Avocado evolved alongside large mammals that could swallow the fruit whole and disperse the seed. Those animals no longer exist, which means avocado is, in a sense, a survivor of a lost ecological partnership. Humans became its replacement disperser. While this seems like an anecdote, it highlights something important. Avocado was not shaped for speed or efficiency. It was shaped for slow, energy-rich nourishment. That evolutionary context aligns well with longevity, which is also about long-term stability rather than short-term performance. As we consider cardiovascular health, avocado's effects extend beyond cholesterol numbers. While it is known to support healthier lipid profiles, the more interesting effect is on endothelial function. The endothelium, the inner lining of blood vessels, regulates blood flow, clotting, and inflammation. Diets rich in monounsaturated fats improve endothelial responsiveness, allowing vessels to dilate appropriately and reducing mechanical stress on the vascular system. This reduces the cumulative damage that leads to atherosclerosis over decades. Again, this is not an acute effect you feel, but a slow preservation of function. Avocado also contains potassium in meaningful amounts. Potassium supports blood pressure regulation by counterbalancing sodium and supporting proper nerve and muscle function. Stable blood pressure reduces strain on the heart, kidneys, and brain. What matters here is not potassium in isolation, but its delivery within a food that also moderates glucose and insulin responses. This integrated effect is what distinguishes whole foods from supplements in the context of aging. As the discussion deepens, it becomes clear that avocado's value lies in systems, not superlatives. It does not detoxify, cure, or reverse aging. Instead, it reduces friction within biological processes that become less efficient over time. It supports membranes, moderates inflammation, stabilizes energy flow, and enhances nutrient utilization. Each of these effects is modest on its own. Together over years, they shape a metabolic environment that is less hostile to cells. One more often ignored aspect is how avocado fits into dietary patterns associated with longevity. It naturally replaces more problematic fats when used consistently. When avocado is used instead of refined carbohydrates or industrial seed oils in certain contexts, overall dietary quality improves without rigid rules. This substitution effect may be one of its most powerful contributions. Longevity rarely comes from adding more. It often comes from replacing sources of chronic stress with sources of stability. In the final stretch of this discussion, it is worth returning to the original assumption that avocado is simply a fashionable food. Trends come and go, but foods that support long-term health tend to share certain characteristics. They are minimally processed, structurally complex, and metabolically calming. Avocado fits this pattern well. Its popularity may fluctuate, but its biological relevance does not depend on marketing. When viewed through the lens of longevity, avocado is not impressive because of any single nutrient. It is impressive because of how it behaves inside the body over time. It slows things down where speed causes damage. It strengthens structures that weaken with age. It helps the body extract more value from what is already there. These are quiet advantages, easy to overlook, and difficult to measure in the short term. Yet they align closely with what we understand about aging as a gradual process shaped by countless small interactions. Understanding avocado in this way changes how it is used. It becomes less about adding fat to a meal and more about shaping the metabolic context of eating. That shift in perspective is where its real value lies. Most discussions about avocado stop at nutrition, but longevity is also shaped by behavior and consistency, and this is where avocado quietly changes how people eat over decades. Foods that support long life tend to be foods that people can include regularly without mental fatigue. Avocado does not demand willpower. It does not rely on restriction or precision. Its texture, satiety, and neutrality allow it to integrate into meals without triggering cycles of craving or compensation. Over time, this matters more than short-term dietary perfection. Diets associated with long-lived populations are not rigid, they are repeatable. Avocado fits naturally into that pattern. Another layer often missed is how avocado interacts with stress physiology. Chronic psychological stress accelerates aging by increasing cortisol, disrupting glucose control, and promoting inflammation. Meals that lead to sharp blood sugar swings amplify this stress response. Because avocado slows digestion and stabilizes post-meal glucose, it indirectly supports a calmer hormonal environment. This is not about mood in the emotional sense, but about reducing unnecessary physiological alarms. When the body spends less time in reactive states, repair and maintenance processes have more opportunity to operate effectively. There is also a mitochondrial angle worth understanding. Mitochondria are responsible for energy production, and their decline is a core feature of aging. Diets high in unstable fats and refined carbohydrates increase oxidative pressure inside these organelles. Monounsaturated fats, like those predominant in avocado, are more resistant to oxidation and place less burden on mitochondrial membranes. Over years, this reduces cumulative damage. Healthier mitochondria mean better energy regulation, less fatigue, and improved resilience under stress, all of which correlate strongly with longevity. Avocado also influences how the liver handles fat and glucose. The liver sits at the center of metabolic aging, deciding whether energy is stored, burned, or converted into harmful byproducts. Diets emphasizing monounsaturated fats improve hepatic insulin sensitivity and reduce fat accumulation in liver cells. This lowers the risk of metabolic dysfunction that often progresses silently for decades before symptoms appear. Again, avocado does not act as a treatment, but as a gentle, continuous signal that nudges metabolism toward balance. As people age, muscle mass and function become increasingly important predictors of survival and independence. While avocado is not a protein source, it supports muscle indirectly by improving nutrient delivery, reducing inflammation, and stabilizing energy availability. Muscles are metabolically active tissues that respond poorly to chaotic energy supply. By contributing to a steadier internal environment, avocado supports the conditions muscles need to remain responsive to activity and repair signals later in life. There is also an important distinction between foods that stimulate and foods that protect. Modern nutrition often favors stimulation, more energy, more activation, more intervention. Avocado belongs to the second category. It protects rather than excites. Protective foods rarely feel dramatic, but they reduce the rate at which systems degrade. Longevity science increasingly points towards slowing damage rather than boosting performance. In that framework, avocado's value becomes clearer. One final point worth considering is how avocado changes food combinations. When it becomes a regular part of meals, it often replaces refined spreads, processed sauces, or sugar-heavy additions. This substitution effect quietly lowers exposure to compounds that accelerate aging, such as oxidized oils and excess sugars. The benefit does not come from avocado alone, but from what it displaces. Over decades, this displacement shapes risk far more than single nutrients ever could. Seen in isolation, avocado is simply a fruit with fat. Seen in context, it is a modifier of dietary patterns, metabolic tone, and long-term stability. It does not promise youth or prevent aging. Instead, it aligns daily eating with the biological realities of how aging actually unfolds. That alignment, repeated consistently, is what ultimately supports a longer, healthier life. To complete the picture, it helps to zoom out one last time and look at avocado through the lens of time, not outcomes. Longevity is not something the body switches on later in life. It is shaped quietly in midlife and earlier, through repeated signals about abundance, safety, and efficiency. Avocado sends a specific type of signal. It tells the body that energy is available, but not urgent, that nutrients are coming in a form that can be handled without defensive reactions, that there is no need to overstore, overreact, or overcorrect. These signals matter because aging accelerates when the body is forced into constant adaptation. Modern diets often create a paradox where the body is overfed but undernourished, flooded with calories that arrive too quickly and lack structural complexity. This keeps metabolic systems in a state of alert. Avocado works in the opposite direction. Its physical structure, its fat-water-fiber combination, and its slow digestion encourage metabolic patience. Over time, this patience translates into less oxidative stress, fewer inflammatory signals, and more efficient cellular maintenance. None of this is dramatic. That is precisely why it is powerful. There is also an important psychological neutrality to avocado. Foods that are strongly stimulating often lead to cycles of desire and restraint. Foods that are bland or restrictive lead to disengagement. Avocado sits in the middle. It is satisfying without being addictive, rich without being destabilizing. This supports long-term adherence to healthier eating patterns without conscious effort. Longevity research consistently shows that sustainability beats optimization. The best diet is not the one that looks ideal on paper, but the one that can be followed calmly for decades. From a systems perspective, avocado touches multiple aging pathways at once. It influences lipid metabolism, glucose regulation, vascular function, inflammation, gut ecology, and cellular membranes. Each effect is modest. Together, they reduce biological noise. Aging accelerates when systems interfere with each other, when inflammation disrupts insulin signaling, when glucose instability damages vessels, when oxidative stress stiffens membranes. Avocado lowers that interference. It makes the internal environment more predictable and predictability is protective. It is also worth noting what avocado does not do. It does not spike energy, suppress appetite unnaturally, or override hunger signals. It does not force the body into extremes. Longevity is rarely supported by extremes. It is supported by foods that cooperate with physiology rather than attempting to dominate it. Avocado is cooperative by nature. When all of this is taken together, avocado stops being a health trend and starts looking like a structural food. Not essential, not magical, but strategically aligned with how long-lived systems behave. Its real contribution to longevity is not that it adds something extraordinary, but that it removes friction from everyday metabolism. Over years, that reduction in friction shapes outcomes more reliably than any short-term intervention. Understanding avocado this way changes the conversation. The question is no longer whether it is healthy, but whether it helps the body age with less resistance. In that sense, avocado earns its place not as a superfood, but as a stabilizing presence in a long life. There is a final, quieter implication that often gets overlooked when talking about avocado and longevity, and it has less to do with biology alone and more to do with decision-making over time. As people age, nutritional choices tend to drift toward convenience, habit, and familiarity. Foods that require constant calculation, restriction, or justification usually disappear first. Avocado survives this transition because it asks very little of the person eating it. It does not require tracking, cycling, or justification. It remains useful even when attention and energy are limited. That reliability matters in later decades, when consistency becomes more important than optimization. Longevity is shaped not only by what the body can process, but by what the mind is willing to maintain. Stress around food choices, fear of eating the wrong thing, or oscillation between indulgence and control all have physiological consequences. Avocado reduces that cognitive load. It is broadly compatible with stable metabolic goals, flexible eating patterns, and changing appetites across life stages. That adaptability is rare, and it is one reason foods like this persist across cultures and generations. There is also an ethical dimension to longevity science that often remains unspoken. Long life is not valuable if it is accompanied by fragility, rigidity, or constant intervention. Foods that support longevity without demanding obsession align better with a life that remains functional, social, and grounded. Avocado fits into meals shared with others, into simple preparations, into ordinary routines. It supports health without isolating the person from normal eating behaviors. This social integration indirectly supports longevity by preserving connection, routine, and psychological stability. When stripped of marketing and trends, avocado represents a category of food that modern diets often lack: structurally complete, metabolically calm, and behaviorally sustainable. It does not push the body forward aggressively. It holds things together. Over long periods, that holding effect becomes visible in reduced strain on systems that usually degrade first: blood vessels, metabolic regulation, inflammatory balance, and cellular resilience. In the end, avocado is not important because it extends life in a measurable way on its own. It is important because it aligns daily eating with the conditions under which the body ages more slowly and with less resistance. It supports longevity not by standing out, but by fitting in, quietly, repeatedly, and without drama. That is often how the most meaningful biological advantages work.